I had seen my fair share of ridiculous rules, but this one took the cake. After a long shift at the sheriff's office, I pulled into my driveway, threw my truck into park and grabbed my coffee from the cup holder. It had been a slow day, just a few minor disturbances, nothing that required more than a raised eyebrow and a couple of citations. All I wanted now was a quiet evening, maybe kick my boots off and catch up on a game. But as soon as I stepped out, I noticed something unusual. A glossy white paper was taped to my garage door. Not just any paper, a citation. And not from my department either. Before we dive in, comment where you watching from, give a like to this video and subscribe to give support to this channel. It was from the Homeowners Association. I squinted at the bold letters. Violation, unauthorized vehicle in driveway. Fine, $250. Due immediately. I snorted. Unauthorized? Since when was parking in my own driveway a crime? Before I could even process the absurdity, a golf cart, yes, a freaking golf cart, came rolling down the street. It had a flashing yellow light duct taped to the roof and a massive HOA logo slapped on the side like some kind of official government vehicle. Two men sat inside, both wearing matching black polo shirts with HOA enforcement embroidered on the chest. One of them, a scrawny guy with a clipboard and aviator sunglasses that were 2 sizes too big, hopped out as soon as they pulled up. "Afternoon, sir," he said, voice dripping with fake authority. "You're in violation of HOA Regulation 14B. I stared at him. "For what?" He tapped the clipboard like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Parking in your driveway." I let out a sharp laugh. "You mean the driveway I own?" His partner, a beefy guy with a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt, stepped out of the golf cart, arms crossed. "HOA policy states that all vehicles must be parked inside garages, no exceptions. Your truck's been out here for over 2 hours. That's a violation." I shook my head. "That's ridiculous." "Well, rules are rules," the scrawny one said, flipping through his clipboard dramatically. "And since this is your 3rd violation." I cut him off. "Third? When were the first 2? He flipped back a few pages. "One was last month, your grass was an inch too high." I clenched my jaw. "An inch?" "The second was last week," he continued, ignoring me. "Your garbage cans were on the curb past 9 a.m. HOA policy states they must be removed by 8:59 a.m. sharp." I was beginning to wonder if these guys actually believed their own nonsense. "And now," he said, pointing at my truck, "you're illegally parked." I crossed my arms. "What's next?" "A fine for breathing too loud." The beefy guy's hand drifted to his belt, where a cheap plastic badge was clipped next to his walkie-talkie. It looked like something out of a kid's police playset. "Sir, failure to comply may result in further action." I raised an eyebrow. "Further action?" The scrawny one adjusted his sunglasses. "If you don't pay the fine by the end of the week, the HOA has the right to escalate." I folded my arms. "And what does escalate mean?" The two exchanged a glance. The beefy guy leaned in, his voice lowering like he was about to say something earth-shattering. "We can arrest you." Silence. Then I burst out laughing. "Arrest me?" I had dealt with bank robbers, fugitives, and people who thought they could outsmart the law. But this was next-level stupidity. I leaned in, staring both of them down. "Let me get this straight. You two, driving a golf cart with fake badges, think you can arrest me, a real sheriff, for parking in my own driveway?" Neither spoke. Then the scrawny one straightened his posture and pulled out a pair of plastic zip-tie handcuffs. "Sir, I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back." I swear I almost lost it right there. But before I could say anything else, I noticed something even crazier. Just behind them, peeking out from behind a house, was a camera. A small, handheld camcorder, held by a woman in an HOA badge. Recording everything. Something clicked in my head. This wasn't just about ridiculous fines. They were setting me up. And they had no idea who they were messing with. I had seen plenty of dumb criminals in my time, but these two took the trophy. Here they were, standing in my driveway in their matching black polos and fake badges, actually thinking they could slap some plastic zip-tie cuffs on me and parade me around like a criminal. And the worst part? They had a plan. The scrawny one with the clipboard cleared his throat. "Sir, this is your final warning. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." I held up my own real badge, the one with actual legal authority behind it. "You two realize this is a felony, right?" They didn't flinch. The beefy one shifted his weight and muttered into his walkie-talkie, trying to sound official. "Dispatch, suspect is resisting arrest." I glanced around. Who was he even talking to? Dispatch. The only thing that radio was connected to was probably the HOA's bingo night coordinator. Then I turned my attention to the real problem, the woman with the camera. She was standing about 20 feet away, half hidden behind a tree, recording everything. She wore a smug little smirk as if she had already won. I had a sinking feeling I knew what they were up to. This wasn't about a parking violation. This was a setup. They wanted footage of me losing my temper, pushing one of them, maybe even drawing my gun. Something they could edit, slap online, and parade around HOA meetings as evidence that I was an unstable menace to the community. It almost made me laugh. They really thought they could bait me. I let out a slow breath. Time to play it smart. I put my hands on my hips, giving them my most unimpressed look. All right, officers. If you're really arresting me, you must have probable cause. What's the charge? The scrawny one straightened up. Violating HOA Regulation 14B. I nodded. Which is? He squinted at his clipboard. Unauthorized vehicle in driveway. Aha. I gestured to my badge. And that's a crime how? The beefy guy huffed. HOA rules are legally binding. You signed the contract when you moved in. Now we were getting somewhere. I rubbed my chin, pretending to think. So you're saying that if someone breaks an HOA rule, they can be arrested? Exactly, the scrawny one said smugly. We have authority. I grinned. Great. Then tell me this. Where in the state penal code does it say HOA violations are arrestable offenses? Silence. The scrawny one blinked. The beefy one's jaw clenched. I pressed on. Because last I checked, parking violations are civil matters. You can fine me, sure. But you can't arrest me unless I've actually committed a crime. More silence. Then the scrawny one tried to recover. Well, HOA Article 3, Section 5 states that we have the right to detain. I cut him off. Detaining someone against their will is called false imprisonment. You know what the penalty for that is? They didn't answer. I leaned in. Up to 5 years in prison. The beefy guy shifted on his feet. We were just enforcing the rules. And impersonating a law enforcement officer? That's another felony. I nodded toward his fake badge. I could cuff you right now. The scrawny one's face turned pale. Then the woman with the camera spoke up. Actually, she said, stepping forward with a sickly sweet smile, we're well within our rights. I turned to her, already bracing for the nonsense. She tucked the camera under her arm. I'm Denise Holloway, head of the HOA Compliance Board. She said it like I was supposed to be impressed. I wasn't. She continued. Per our bylaws, if a homeowner refuses to comply with a citation, the HOA has the right to escalate enforcement. That includes legal action, fines, and, if necessary, detainment. I stared at her. Detainment? She nodded. Under HOA policy, our enforcement officers, she gestured to the two clowns in matching polos, are allowed to hold non-compliant homeowners until the HOA board deems the issue resolved. I let that sink in. Then I laughed. Art. Lady, I said, wiping my eyes. You actually think you have the legal power to kidnap people? Denise's smile faltered. It's not kidnapping. It's HOA enforcement. I shook my head. No, it's illegal. And just so we're clear, I'm the real sheriff here. Not you, not these two morons, and definitely not the HOA. She huffed. You're breaking the rules. I smirked. And you're breaking actual laws. Denise's lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced at the scrawny guy and gave a small nod. And that's when he lunged at me with the zip-tie cuffs. The scrawny guy made his move, lunging at me with his dollar store zip-tie cuffs, probably thinking he'd get the drop on me. Big mistake. Before his hands even reached my wrist, I grabbed his arm, twisted, and sent him sprawling onto the pavement with a satisfying thud. He let out a pitiful yelp, rolling onto his back and clutching his shoulder like I'd just snapped it in half. The beefy one took a step forward like he wanted to avenge his fallen comrade, but I shot him a look that made him think twice. He hesitated, then took a slow, cautious step back. Denise, on the other hand, looked ready to explode. You assaulted my officer, she shrieked. I gave her a blank stare. What officer? I pointed to the guy still rolling around like a turtle on its back. You mean this guy? The one who just tried to illegally detain a law enforcement officer. Her face turned red. This is unacceptable. The HOA will be pressing charges. I laughed. Actually laughed. Good luck with that, I said, pulling out my phone. Because I think the real cops are going to be interested in your crimes. I dialed the local non-emergency line, already picturing how great it was going to feel when an actual squad car rolled up to deal with this nonsense. Denise must have sensed things were going sideways because her expression shifted. She straightened her blouse, took a deep breath, and forced a smile. "All right," she said, her tone suddenly syrupy sweet. "I think we've had a little misunderstanding." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh." She nodded. "Let's all take a step back. Maybe we can." I cut her off. "You impersonated law enforcement, tried to detain a homeowner, and now you're backpedaling because you realize just how deep you've stepped in it." Denise's jaw tightened, but she forced the smile to stay in place. "There's no need to escalate this further." I smirked. "Oh, we're way past that." At that moment I spotted something interesting. The scrawny guy had finally stopped writhing on the pavement and was trying to shove something under his shirt. A body cam. I narrowed my eyes. "What do you have there?" "And nothing." He scrambled to his feet, but I was faster. In one swift motion, I grabbed the little device from his hands and turned it over. A recording light. They had been filming everything. I looked up at Denise, whose face had now gone from fake sweet to full panic. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. The first few seconds were static and muffled voices. Then, clear as day, came Denise's voice. "We'll provoke him. If he resists, we've got him. If he touches us, we press charges. Either way, we'll get him out of here." Bingo. I turned the camera around so she could see the playback. "You want to explain this?" Denise's mouth opened, then shut. Then opened again. Nothing came out. The beefy guy actually gulped. The scrawny one looked like he was about to faint. I let out a low whistle. "Wow. Y'all were really banking on setting me up, huh?" Denise snapped out of it. She lunged for the camera, but I held it high. "Nope," I said. "This little beauty is evidence." She gritted her teeth. "That recording is private HOA property." I grinned. "Not anymore." At that exact moment, the sound of police sirens filled the air. Denise whirled toward the street, eyes wide. A real patrol car pulled up to the curb. Her panic was almost palpable. I turned to the scrawny guy and handed him back his camera. "Hey, buddy? You might want to let them know you've got something they'd be interested in." He hesitated, but then, to everyone's surprise, he nodded. Denise's head snapped toward him. "What are you doing?" But he didn't answer. And as the real officers stepped out of their car, one thing became crystal clear. This HOA had just made a fatal mistake. The moment the real cops stepped out of their patrol car, you could feel the shift in the air. Denise, normally all fire and brimstone, suddenly looked like someone had just yanked the rug out from under her. The first officer, a tall, no-nonsense guy with a buzz cut, adjusted his belt and glanced between us. "Got a call about a possible disturbance?" I smirked. "Oh, we've got more than that." Denise pounced before I could say another word. "Officer," she cried, striding forward like she was about to shake hands with the mayor. "Thank goodness you're here. This man," she jabbed a finger in my direction, "is causing a disturbance on HOA property and assaulted one of our security officers." Buzzcut didn't even blink. "That's so." He turned to me. "Sir, you got a response to that?" I crossed my arms. "Yeah, I do. First off, I own this property. Second, these clowns," I waved toward her two officers, "aren't security. They're impersonating law enforcement. Third," I turned to the scrawny guy who was still clutching his body cam like it was a winning lottery ticket. "You want to go ahead and roll that footage for them?" His eyes darted between Denise and me. You could see the internal battle happening in his head, whether to go down with the sinking ship or save his own skin. In the end, self-preservation won out. He swallowed hard and held out the camera. "You might want to see this," he mumbled. Denise looked like she wanted to tackle him on the spot. Buzzcut took the camera, pressed play, and everything came spilling out. "We'll provoke him. If he resists, we've got him. If he touches us, we press charges. Either way, we'll get him out of here." The other officer, a woman with short brown hair and sharp eyes, let out a low whistle. Well, that doesn't sound great." Buzzcut nodded. "No, it does not." He glanced at me. "And you said these guys were impersonating officers?" I pointed at their ridiculous badges. "Take a look for yourself." Brown hair stepped up to the beefy guy and snatched his badge off his chest. She turned it over, inspecting it. Then she let out a short, humorless laugh. "This says Community Safety Officer," she said. "And it's got a cartoon eagle on it." I couldn't help it. I snorted. Buzzcut sighed and shook his head. "All right. Here's what's gonna happen." He turned to Denise. "First, you're gonna hand over any identification you have on you." Denise scoffed. "Excuse me?" He didn't flinch. "Now." Her fake confidence cracked right then and there. She reached into her purse and pulled out a driver's license with stiff, jerky movements. Buzzcut took it, examined it, and then radioed in her name. Denise started shifting on her feet. I'd seen enough guilty people in my line of work to know when someone was sweating. Meanwhile, brown hair turned to the HOA's two wannabe enforcers. And you too? You got actual security licenses? Beefy looked at Scrawny. Scrawny looked at Beefy. Neither said a word. Brown hair let out a mock-impressed nod. That's what I thought. Then the radio crackled. The dispatch officer's voice came through loud and clear. Yeah, we've got something on that name. Subject has a history of fraud, 2 prior investigations into misuse of HOA funds. Both cases were dropped due to lack of evidence. I turned slowly to look at Denise. She was stone still. Buzzcut exhaled through his nose. Well, isn't that interesting? Denise snapped. You have no right to dig into my past, she shrieked. I haven't done anything wrong. This is a violation of. She stopped when she saw brown hair holding out a set of handcuffs. Denise, brown hair said, her voice almost bored. You're under arrest for impersonating law enforcement. We're also going to be taking a closer look at those old fraud cases. Denise's face drained of color. Beefy and Scrawny tried to step away, but Buzzcut shot them a glare. You too? You're getting cited for impersonation. Might want to think twice before you throw on fake badges next time. I crossed my arms, watching as the scene unfolded beautifully. Denise was still sputtering as brown hair slapped the cuffs on her. This is ridiculous. I was only trying to protect the community. Buzzcut shook his head. Lady, from where I'm standing, you were only trying to protect yourself. As they led her toward the squad car, I couldn't help but smirk. But something told me this was only the beginning. The moment Denise was shoved into the back of the patrol car, she started ranting like a lunatic. This isn't over, she screeched, rattling the metal grate between her and the officers. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The board will fix this. You'll all regret this. I just leaned against my truck, arms crossed, watching the whole thing unfold like it was primetime television. Buzzcut and brown hair ignored her, finishing up their paperwork while the 2 fake security goons stood there looking like wet dogs in a thunderstorm. Beefy finally found his voice. So we're free to go, right? Buzzcut didn't even glance up. Not yet. You'll be hearing from the county prosecutor about your little stunt. Scrawny let out a tiny, pitiful whimper. I'll be honest, watching them get taken down felt good, but I knew Denise wasn't the real endgame here. She was just the loudest cockroach in the infestation. And I had a hunch there was more filth hiding under the HOA's rug. The cops finally pulled out, leaving me alone in my driveway, the neighborhood eerily quiet. At least for now. I didn't have to wait long for their retaliation. The very next morning, I found a fresh violation notice taped to my front door. It was written in the kind of pretentious, overcomplicated language that only desperate bureaucrats use when they're trying to sound important. Notice of immediate action required. It has come to our attention that your property is in violation of several HOA regulations, including but not limited to parking infractions, landscaping discrepancies, failure to maintain uniform aesthetics in accordance with HOA bylaws. I barely made it through the first paragraph before I snorted. Landscaping discrepancies? That was rich, considering the HOA had dead grass and busted sprinklers in the common areas. But the best part? At the bottom, in bold red letters, was the fine amount. $10,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. It was so blatantly ridiculous that I had to read it twice just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The HOA wasn't just playing dirty, they were going nuclear. I shook my head and chuckled. Oh, you poor stupid morons. They must have thought I was just going to roll over and take it. But what they didn't know was that I'd already done my homework. I had spent the entire previous night digging into the HOA's records. And what I found was juicy. Turns out, Denise wasn't the only board member with a shady past. I found years of financial reports, some of them laughably sloppy, showing exorbitant spending on community projects that never actually happened. Tens of thousands of dollars were allocated for playground renovations, yet the playground still looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic horror film. Then there was the mystery landscaping company that had been paid over $50,000 last year, except no one could find a single record of them ever existing. And the best part? The HOA had been operating without a valid corporate license for the past 6 months. That meant that legally they weren't even a functioning HOA. In other words, every fine they issued, every enforcement they attempted, it was all worthless. I grinned. This was about to be fun. I stood in my kitchen, sipping my coffee, staring at the absurd fine notice still sitting on my counter. 10 grand? For parking in my own driveway? The HOA must have been feeling real bold after Denise's little stunt failed. But they had no idea they just handed me the perfect opportunity to bury them. I grabbed my laptop and got to work, dropping the first bomb. See, the HOA was banking on me either paying up or getting scared. Instead, I drafted a formal cease and desist letter, citing every single legal violation I had uncovered. To the corrupt clowns of the HOA board, per my recent investigation, I have discovered the following infractions committed by your so-called governing body. Financial mismanagement amounting to tens of thousands of dollars. Failure to maintain a legal corporate status, rendering all HOA actions invalid. Issuance of fraudulent fines with no legal standing. Effective immediately, I demand that you rescind all fines and notices issued to me and my property. Cease all unlawful harassment. Prepare for an external audit and legal review by the appropriate authorities. Failure to comply will result in legal escalation, public exposure, and, oh yeah, a little visit from the IRS. Best regards. Your worst nightmare. I hit send and smiled. But that was just the first punch. I wasn't just going to wait around and let the HOA come up with more weak, petty counterattacks. I had leverage and I was going to use it. First, I contacted the county clerk's office to report their expired corporate license. Then, I forwarded everything I found to a local investigative journalist who specialized in exposing HOA corruption. And just to really twist the knife, I called up a homeowners' rights attorney who was very eager to take a case like this. By lunchtime, the HOA board had no idea their entire house of cards was shaking. It didn't take long for the first signs of panic to appear. That afternoon, I got a frantic voicemail from some HOA board member I'd never even spoken to before. Hello, this is Kevin from the HOA board. We'd like to discuss your concerns and come to a resolution. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. Translation? They were scared. They knew they were exposed and now they wanted to negotiate. I decided to let them sweat it out for a bit. But that night? That's when things took a turn. I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of shuffling outside my house. At first, I thought it was just raccoons, or maybe a stray cat knocking over the trash cans. Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of someone jiggling my front door handle. My entire body went ice cold. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by my nightstand and crept toward the door. Through the peephole, I saw two figures dressed in dark clothing trying, and failing, to break into my house. And then I saw the HOA logo on one of their jackets. They weren't just desperate. They were stupid. I stood frozen for half a second, processing the sheer audacity of what I was witnessing. The HOA had sent people to break into my house. Did they think they were in some kind of low-budget crime thriller? My grip tightened around the baseball bat. I could feel the adrenaline kicking in, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. But I wasn't just going to stand there and let them keep trying. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and reached for the security system control panel. With one tap, the alarm screamed to life. A deafening siren blared through the neighborhood, lights flashing like a nightclub. The two wannabe criminals flinched hard, one of them tripping over his own feet in panic. I saw the second guy, shorter, balding, fumble with something in his jacket before yanking out a fake badge. Oh, this was too good. The HOA was actually trying to pretend to be law enforcement now? I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. Yeah, hi. I've got two men attempting to break into my house. One of them is impersonating an officer. That last part was all I needed to say. The dispatcher's tone went ice cold. We're sending units now. Stay inside and remain on the line. I grinned. Oh, don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. The two men were now frantically trying to get away, but here's the thing. The alarm had woken up half the neighborhood. And my front yard camera? It had everything recorded. By the time the first police cruiser arrived, the HOA goons were still bumbling around, trying to figure out if they should run or play it cool. Spoiler, they did neither. The second they saw actual law enforcement stepping out of their patrol cars, the short guy, let's call him Fake Cop Frank, held up his fake badge like it meant something. This is just a misunderstanding, he blurted out. Drop the badge. Hands where we can see them, the officer ordered. But I'm with the HOA. That line? That was what did it. One of the cops actually laughed. 5 minutes later, both Frank and his buddy were in handcuffs, getting read their rights. Meanwhile, I leaned against my doorframe, sipping a fresh cup of coffee, enjoying every second of it. By morning, news of the break-in had spread like wildfire. The HOA board went into full damage control mode. Denise? She was suspiciously silent. Kevin, the guy who had left me that pathetic voicemail earlier, sent another one. We had no idea about last night's events. This was not an HOA-sanctioned action. We, would really like to resolve this as soon as possible. Translation? They were screwed and they knew it. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. After reviewing the footage with the police, I took a little trip to City Hall. See all that financial fraud I'd uncovered? That expired corporate license? Turns out, if you can prove an HOA is violating its own bylaws while also failing to meet legal requirements, you can petition to dissolve it entirely. And guess what? I had everything I needed. I filled out the paperwork, submitted the evidence, and by the time I walked out of that office, the HOA had officially been put under legal review. They had no idea what was coming next. The fallout started almost immediately. By the time the city officials got involved, the HOA board was already scrambling to save themselves. Denise, Kevin, and the rest of their little band of rule-happy tyrants suddenly found themselves under investigation. Not just for the attempted break-in but for the financial fraud, the fake fines, and their complete lack of legal standing. Oh, and that phony badge Frank had flashed? Yeah, impersonating law enforcement is a felony. The cops were very interested in that. And the best part? The homeowners had had enough. The moment my security footage leaked online, it spread like wildfire. The local news station ran a full segment on it, complete with dramatic background music. Neighbors who had been afraid to speak up before were now furious. One by one they started coming forward with their own horror stories. Unfair fines, threats, even one case where the HOA had tried to illegally tow a veteran's car from his driveway. It was an avalanche of outrage. At the next emergency HOA meeting, which I made sure to attend front row with popcorn, people let loose. "Where's all the money you've been collecting?" one homeowner shouted. "I never even voted for this HO. How is it even legal?" another demanded. Denise looked like she was about to pass out. Kevin, for once, wasn't running his mouth. They were cornered. And then the real bomb dropped. See, while they were busy trying to figure out how to explain away their crimes, I had already worked with the city to file the petition to dissolve the HOA. And guess what? Enough homeowners had signed it. The city officials arrived in person that evening with their ruling. Due to multiple legal violations, fraudulent activity, and failure to comply with municipal laws, the HOA's authority is hereby revoked. The room erupted. Cheers, clapping, someone even popped a bottle of champagne. Denise? She stormed out, red-faced and shaking. Kevin tried to save face by muttering something about legal action before realizing he had no ground to stand on. And the best part? All those fake fines? The stolen money? They were ordered to pay it all back. A few weeks later, I was standing in my driveway, enjoying my completely legal parking spot, when I noticed a moving truck outside Denise's house. Turns out she had put her house on the market. Kevin? He wasn't far behind. The HOA's biggest enforcers were gone for good. And me? I was still right here, sipping my coffee, enjoying the sweet, sweet sound of silence in a neighborhood finally free from their nonsense. The HOA had tried to scare me, fine me, even have me arrested. But in the end, I was still standing. And they were finished.